The rope is already hanging above your head. You can feel the rough wood of the platform beneath your boots. The morning air is cold and smells of damp stone and smoke from nearby chimneys. Somewhere in the crowd, a man coughs. Another voice whispers. The rope creaks. You try not to look at it, but you already know what it means. In Victorian London, public executions were not rare events. Thousands of people would gather in the streets to watch them. And today, you are the reason they came. You stand on the scaffold, surrounded by strangers, guards, and the man who will pull the lever. And there is only one question left. What happens in the last minute before the rope tightens? This is not a horror movie. This is a story. And if you enjoy real dark history told this way, don't forget to subscribe. Because tonight, you're standing on the gallows. The sound beneath the platform. The rope moves slightly in the morning wind. You notice it before anyone else does. Just a small movement, a quiet sway above your head. The platform beneath your boots feels rough, old wood, damp from the fog that rolled through London before dawn. The crowd is still arriving. You hear them before you see them. Boots on cobblestone, low voices, a laugh somewhere in the distance. Someone is selling something. Bread, perhaps. Public executions in Victorian London were not silent events. They were gatherings, entertainment. You shift your weight slightly. The guards beside you notice the movement, but say nothing. They have seen this many times before. Men standing where you stand now. Men who breathe slowly, trying to keep their legs from trembling. You look down at the wooden boards beneath your feet. The platform is higher than you expected. Below it, the crowd will soon be packed tightly together. Thousands sometimes came to watch. But something else catches your attention. A sound, very faint. You freeze. At first, you think it might be the wind. Then, perhaps, someone shifting beneath the platform. The execution scaffold is not empty below. There are beams, support posts, ropes and levers. But this sound is different. A dull thud. You hear it again, soft, almost careful, from somewhere beneath the wood. You glance down. No one else seems to react. The guards are speaking quietly with the executioner. The crowd is growing louder. Another thud. You swallow slowly. Perhaps it is just the wood settling. Old structures often do that. Yet the sound comes again. Not random, not the wind. 3 slow knocks from beneath the platform. Your eyes move to the trap door at your feet. The iron hinge is worn smooth from years of use. Many men have stood here. Many have waited for the lever to drop. But now, standing above that dark space beneath the scaffold, you begin to wonder something strange. What if the platform is not empty? A shout breaks the thought. The crowd is cheering. You finally look up. The square is filling fast. People climb onto carts. Others stand on barrels to see better. Public executions were once common in London, especially at places like Newgate Prison. Thousands gathered outside the prison gates when a hanging was scheduled. Some came out of curiosity. Some came out of anger. Some came because it was simply part of life. But the closer the hour came, the quieter the crowd often became. Because the man on the scaffold was not a story. He was real. And today, that man is you. The executioner steps forward. You see him now for the first time clearly. His coat is dark, his hands are steady. He checks the rope with slow professional movements, a job he has done many times. But your mind keeps drifting back to the sound. You heard it again, this time slightly louder. A dull knock from beneath the trapdoor. You glance down again. The platform boards look perfectly still, yet something in your stomach tightens. Because you know one thing about wooden structures: sound travels through them, which means whatever made that noise is directly below you. The executioner turns. He studies your face for a moment, perhaps searching for panic. Instead, he sees something else: confusion. You almost ask him, you almost say it. Did you hear that? But the moment passes. The crowd roars again. Somewhere a bell rings. The hour is approaching. And beneath your feet, the sound comes again. 3 slow knocks from the darkness under the scaffold. The crowd of London. The sound does not come again immediately. That somehow makes it worse. If it had continued, knocking and knocking beneath your boots like some frantic prisoner under the stage, you might have been able to call it madness and be done with it. Fear can be easier when it is loud, but silence leaves room for thought. And thought, on a scaffold, is a cruel companion. You keep your face still. That feels important, not for dignity, not for courage. Those are words people use after a thing is finished. Right now, it is simpler than that. If the men beside you see fear in the wrong direction, not toward the rope, not toward the crowd, but toward the wood beneath your feet, they may begin to ask why, and you do not know the answer. The fog that clung to London at dawn is beginning to lift, though not fully. It hangs low across the square, softening the outlines of carts and chimney stacks, thinning only where lanterns and torches burn. The city never wakes cleanly. It leaks into morning by degrees. Smoke first, voices second, then wheels, boots, coughs, arguments, laughter. By the time full daylight comes, London has already been alive for hours. From up here, with your hands bound and your throat dry, the city looks both larger and smaller than you remember. Larger because the crowd seems endless. Smaller because every face below blurs into one thing: witness. They have come to see an ending. Some look eager, some solemn, some merely curious, which may be the most unbearable expression of all. A boy sits on a low wall, eating something from a paper twist, glancing up only now and then, as if your death is no more extraordinary than a cart unloading fish. A woman in a worn bonnet grips the hand of a child who should not be here but is. A pair of young men laugh too loudly, making a show of their own bravery. Near the front, an old man stands hatless, his face set in the flat expression of someone who has seen too many such mornings to be surprised by another. Executions in 19th century London were still public long after many people had begun to call them shameful. Crowds gathered in thousands outside Newgate. Sellers moved through the masses. Printed broadsides told the condemned man's crime, or sometimes invented a more dramatic one if the real facts were too dull. Sermons were preached, warnings were spoken, moral lessons were promised. And yet crowds came for reasons that had little to do with morality. They came for spectacle. They came to feel fear safely from the ground. They came to see whether the body would struggle. They came to witness justice, or to witness power. or simply because London has always been hungry for the sight of what it claims to despise. You look down at the faces again. No one here knows about the sound beneath the scaffold. Or if they do, they give no sign. A gull circles once overhead. It cries sharply and is lost among the bells and voices. Somewhere farther off, a church clock marks the quarter hour. The executioner checks the rope again. One of the guards shifts, boots scraping wood beside you. Still nothing from below. And then, as if in answer to your attempt to forget it, the platform speaks. One knock. You feel it more than hear it this time. A small vibration through the sole of your boot. Not enough to move the plank, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough to tell you that whatever it is real. You keep your eyes forward. The trapdoor lies only inches away. The urge to look down again is almost physical. It pulls at your neck, at your jaw, but you resist it. The executioner is near enough to watch your face, and panic has a way of attracting men in uniform. Instead, you let your gaze travel beyond the scaffold, over the heads of the crowd, to the walls and windows behind them. There are faces there, too. People lean from upper floors, boys sit astride ledges, a woman presses her knuckles to her mouth. A man in a black coat writes notes in a small book, head down, looking up only when the crowd swells. A reporter, perhaps, or a clerk. London always records its appetite, one way or another. For a moment, you think of asking for water. Men did ask. Some prayed. Some shouted. Some denied their guilt until the hood came down. Some gave speeches. Some fainted. Some cursed the crowd and were cursed back. Some went very quiet indeed. You have not yet decided which sort of man you are. Your wrists ache. The rope around them is rough and slightly wet from the fog. It bites more when you shift. You can smell tar from the wood of the scaffold, damp wool from the guard beside you, and underneath it all, the city's constant blend of coal smoke, horse dung, stale beer, and wet stone. There are smells that belong to living cities, and smells that belong to endings. You stand between them. Another microsound moves through the boards. Not a knock this time, a scrape, short, then stillness. Your skin tightens. There are many reasonable explanations, you tell yourself. Tools stored beneath the stage, a worker shifting his weight, a loose support settling, old timber under strain, the machinery of the trap. Some public gallows were temporary structures, erected and dismantled or repaired between uses. Others, more permanent, were used so often that each board must have carried the memory of many feet. But that does not explain rhythm. It does not explain why the earlier sound came in 3 distinct knocks. 3. Not random. Not wind. 3. The executioner lifts the hood in one hand and studies it briefly, as if inspecting cloth for flaws. The gesture is strangely domestic. It could be a man preparing a coat for rain. The ordinariness of it makes your stomach turn. He glances at you. "Cold?" he asks. His voice surprises you. Not because he speaks, but because it is not cruel, merely practical. You answer after a beat. Yes. He nods once, as if this confirms something trivial. It won't matter long. Then he looks away. The words are simple, the kind men say in workplaces when discussing weather or timing, and yet your body hears them differently. Your throat tightens. The crowd blurs for a second at the edges. The scaffold feels narrower. This is what power often sounds like in a civilized city. Not rage, not drama. Routine. A cheer rises suddenly from the far edge of the square. Heads turn. A small commotion opens through the crowd like a seam being pulled. More guards are arriving. Behind them, a closed cart rolls slowly, wheels grinding over cobbles. Whether it brings officials, clergy, papers, or simply more authority, you cannot tell. But the mood shifts. Crowds have instincts. They can feel when a ceremony is nearing its center. You hear a woman crying somewhere below. Not loudly, not hysterically. The sort of contained crying that has already passed through denial and sits now in helplessness. You search the crowd for the source and cannot find it. That is worse than if you had. A visible grief would belong to one person. Invisible grief belongs to the whole square. The guard to your left adjusts his belt. The one to your right clears his throat. The executioner steps behind you, then away again, measuring distance with his eyes. He is waiting for a signal, and everyone on the scaffold knows it except you. Or perhaps you know it too and simply refuse to name it. Beneath your feet, the scrape comes again, longer this time, as if something is dragging across wood below the boards. You cannot stop yourself now. Your eyes flick downward, only for a moment, only enough to see the black seam of the trap, the iron edge, the wet grain of the planks. Nothing moves, but one tiny thing catches your attention. Near the hinge, in the narrow line where two boards meet, something pale is visible. Not much, just the briefest hint of color where there should be only shadow. You stare. The crowd noise swells and recedes like surf. A speech begins somewhere below, perhaps the sheriff, perhaps a clerk reading procedure. You hear none of it clearly. All your attention narrows to that seam in the wood. The pale thing does not move. Then, very slightly, it disappears, drawn back. Your mouth goes dry. A fingertip. The thought arrives whole and immediate. Not wood, not cloth, not chalk or paint. Skin. You jerk your gaze upward before anyone can notice where you have been looking. Your heart is beating too fast now, too hard. There is no room for doubt left, only confusion layered over terror. There is someone under the scaffold, or there was a second ago, and whatever hand reached that seam did not belong there. Public executions were meant to be displays of order, a visible end, a final line under a crime. The condemned above, the authorities beside him, the crowd below. Every body in its place. But London was an untidy city. Bodies crossed boundaries all the time, in the streets, in the hospitals, in the prisons, in the graveyards. And now, perhaps, under the scaffold itself. A memory flickers at the edge of your mind, not of this morning, but of a story half heard, perhaps in a tavern, perhaps in a cell. Something about men beneath platforms, something about officials, something about the dead being taken before the crowd had gone home, something about bodies not staying where the crowd thought they were. But the thought slips away before you can hold it. The speech below ends. A murmur ripples through the square. The executioner steps nearer. One of the guards lays a hand on your arm, and beneath the platform, very softly, close enough now that there can be no mistake, a voice says a single word. Wait.
The men beneath the scaffold.
For a moment you are certain you imagined it. A voice from beneath the scaffold. It was not loud, not even a full whisper, just one word. Wait. You keep your head forward, your eyes on the crowd. But inside your chest, something changes. Because imagination does not usually choose such a precise moment. Not when the executioner stands only a few steps away. Not when the sheriff is reading the final words of the sentence. And certainly not when your feet are standing on a trap door. You breathe slowly. The platform smells of damp wood and old rope. Tar, iron, cold morning fog. But beneath that, another smell drifts upward through the seams of the boards. Earth. Not the soft smell of gardens or rain, a deeper smell. Clay. Grave soil. Your mind begins assembling pieces you do not want to understand. Below the scaffold there are beams, mechanisms, sometimes storage, sometimes nothing at all. But there are also other uses that most crowds never consider. Victorian London had a complicated relationship with death, not simply because executions existed, but because bodies were valuable, very valuable, especially to men who studied them. You hear the crowd shifting below, a ripple of murmurs spreading through the square. The sheriff's voice continues reading, legal words, cold words, words designed to make death sound orderly. Yet you barely hear them, because beneath your boots there is movement again, a soft scraping, wood against wood, then silence. Your throat tightens. You force yourself not to look down again. Instead, you look out over the crowd, thousands of people, most of them waiting for one moment, the drop. Public executions were still common enough in the early 19th century that entire routines had formed around them. Vendors sold pamphlets describing the condemned man's crime. Children climbed onto carts to see above the crowd. Pickpockets worked the edges of the square. And when the execution ended, something else began. Something few people talked about openly. Bodies. Because the law had a second punishment. After death, the body could be taken, dissected, studied, displayed in anatomy theaters, for surgeons and students who needed to understand the human body. You remember hearing this once before, perhaps in a tavern, perhaps whispered in a prison cell. Executed criminals did not always go directly to graves. Sometimes they went to medical schools. The punishment continued after death. The thought crawls slowly through your mind, and beneath your feet, the sound returns. 3 taps, the exact same rhythm you heard earlier. Your heart begins to pound harder, not from fear of the rope, from something else. Because the taps sound deliberate, like a signal. The guard beside you shifts his stance. His boot scrapes against the wood. For a moment, you think he might have heard it too, but he only adjusts his coat and looks back toward the crowd. The executioner steps forward again. He studies the knot of the rope with professional attention. He pulls the line once, testing its weight. The fibers creak softly. You feel a chill run through your spine. This rope has done its work many times before. Victorian executioners were expected to be efficient. Too slow, and the condemned man strangled for minutes. Too fast, and the neck broke instantly. There was a science to it. Length of rope, height of drop, body weight. Executioners kept notes. Some were almost proud of their precision. You watch the rope sway gently in the cold air, and beneath your boots, another whisper rises through the wood. This time, the voice is clearer. Listen. Your chest tightens. You stare straight ahead. The crowd noise washes over the scaffold. Boots shuffle. Someone coughs. A baby cries somewhere near the front. But your attention is now entirely beneath the platform, because the voice continues. Quiet. Urgent. Don't move your feet. Your body obeys before your mind does. You stand perfectly still. The boards feel colder now, almost hollow. A faint draft moves upward through the seams, and then the voice speaks again. There's more than one of us down here. The words slide into your mind like ice water. More than one. You close your eyes for half a second, trying to steady yourself. Public executions created crowds. Crowds created chaos. And chaos created opportunities. Smugglers, pickpockets, radicals, rescue attempts. But none of that explains voices beneath the scaffold. You open your eyes again. The sheriff is finishing the reading of the sentence. The crowd grows quieter. The moment is approaching. The executioner lifts the hood again. His movements are calm, practiced. He steps closer, and beneath the platform, the unseen voice speaks one last time. We can get you off the rope. A pause. Then the words that change everything. But you have to trust us. The price of a body. The executioner steps closer. You hear the fabric of his coat shift as he moves behind you. The crowd grows quieter. That always happens just before the end. A strange hush spreads through a public execution. Thousands of people stand in the same square. Yet for a few seconds, the entire place holds its breath. You feel the executioner's hand brush the back of your shoulder. Not roughly, just enough to guide you half a step forward. The rope above sways slightly. You smell it now. Hemp. Tar. Old sweat from hands that tested it before. The hood hangs from the executioner's other hand. Black cloth. Thick. Heavy. When it covers your face, the world will disappear. Many men panic when that happens. Not because of darkness, but because darkness makes the drop feel closer. You hear the voice beneath the scaffold again. Soft. Urgent. Stay still. Your jaw tightens. You are already staying still. You have no choice. The executioner lifts the hood higher. For a moment, the black cloth fills the corner of your vision. The crowd shifts below. Someone laughs nervously. Another person shouts something that disappears into the noise. Public executions had always been a contradiction. They were meant to demonstrate justice, but crowds did not behave like courts. Crowds behaved like storms. Some cheered, some prayed, some simply stared. And while they stared at the scaffold, they rarely thought about what happened afterward, because when the crowd left, the body remained. And in 19th century London, a body was not just a body. It was property. You hear the voice beneath you again. 3 minutes. You blink. 3 minutes. The executioner pulls the rope downward once more, testing tension. Your heart begins beating faster again. 3 minutes until what? Your mind races through possibilities. Rescue. Sabotage. Madness. None of them make sense. Yet the voice continues. They're waiting. You whisper without moving your lips. Who? For a moment, you think the man below did not hear you. Then the answer comes. The surgeons. The word lands in your chest like a stone. Surgeons. Your mind flashes back to things you once heard in prison corridors. Stories whispered after dark. Bodies taken from the gallows, carried quickly away before burial. Not to graves, to anatomy halls. Because the law once allowed executed criminals to be dissected, it was considered an additional punishment, a warning to others. Your skin grows cold. The executioner lifts the hood slightly higher. From the crowd, a woman screams something unintelligible, perhaps a protest, perhaps a prayer. But the sheriff raises his hand. The signal is close. You swallow. And beneath the scaffold, the voice speaks again. They're under the platform. Your breath catches. Who? The collectors. A new word. Collectors. You glance down for the briefest second. The boards look the same. Old wood, iron hinges, dark seams. But now your imagination fills the space below with figures. Men waiting in the shadow, listening, watching. In the early 19th century, London faced a strange crisis. Medical schools were growing. Surgeons needed bodies to study. But the law allowed only one legal source: executed criminals. And there were not enough of them. Not nearly enough. The result was a new profession.
Men who stole bodies from graves. Resurrection men. Body snatchers. They dug up the dead and sold them to anatomy schools, sometimes within hours of burial, sometimes the same night. But even that supply was uncertain, because graveyards were guarded, families watched, churches protested, and so surgeons often looked for faster ways. The voice beneath the scaffold whispers again. They take them before burial now. Your stomach twists. From the gallows. The pieces begin fitting together. Executed men died publicly, but once the crowd dispersed, their bodies were valuable. Doctors paid good money for them. Students needed them. The dead became merchandise. You hear movement beneath the platform again. Not scraping. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. They're waiting for the drop. Your pulse pounds in your ears. You stare at the rope again. You understand now. If the execution happens, the body becomes theirs. A legal corpse. No family. No burial. Just another specimen. The executioner moves behind you. You feel his presence closer now. The hood lifts higher. The sheriff raises his arm. The crowd begins murmuring again. But the voice below speaks one last time. If the trap opens, we lose you. A pause. Then a whisper that chills your spine. But if you step left when the lever drops, the rope won't tighten. Your mind struggles to follow. That's impossible. The answer comes instantly. No. Another pause. Then the truth. Because the trap door isn't where they think it is. Your eyes flick down again. The wood beneath your feet suddenly feels unfamiliar. Too narrow. Too angled. Too hollow. And for the first time since climbing the scaffold, you realize something terrifying. The platform may not work the way the crowd believes. Above you, the rope sways gently. Below you, men wait in darkness. And in a few seconds, someone will pull the lever. The drop that didn't happen. The sheriff raises his hand. You see it only out of the corner of your eye, but the crowd sees it clearly. The murmur that fills the square suddenly collapses into silence. Thousands of people, and yet the quiet feels heavier than the noise ever did. This is the moment they came for. You feel the executioner step closer behind you. His breath is slow, steady, professional. The hood rises, black cloth moving toward your face. You hear the voice beneath the scaffold one more time. Soft, urgent. Left. Your throat tightens. You do not know these men. You do not know if they are liars, or mad, or something worse. But you know one thing. If you do nothing, the rope will tighten around your neck. The hood pauses in front of your eyes. For a brief second, the executioner studies your face, perhaps searching for panic, perhaps measuring the exact moment to move. He has done this before, many times. The sheriff's voice rises. The final words of procedure. You barely hear them, because your mind is fixed on the wooden boards beneath your boots, on the strange hollow sound you heard earlier, on the fingertip that appeared between the seams, and on the quiet certainty in the voice below. Left. Your heart begins to pound harder. The hood drops over your head. The world disappears. Black. The crowd fades instantly into a distant roar. Inside the hood, the air smells of old cloth and sweat. Your breathing becomes loud. Too loud. You hear the rope move. You feel the executioner's hands behind your neck. Rough fingers. Efficient. The noose slides down over your head. The fibers scrape against your jaw. The knot is pulled to the side, just behind your ear. You remember hearing once that this position mattered. The knot determined how quickly a man died. The executioner tightens the rope. You feel its weight now. Heavy, cold, final. Below your boots, the wooden boards creak. Your mind counts seconds. You imagine the lever, the trapdoor opening, the drop. But beneath the hood, the voice whispers again, now very close. Now remember. Left. You shift your weight slightly. The guards probably think it is fear. Condemned men often sway before the drop. No one stops you. The sheriff's voice stops speaking. The silence spreads through the square again. You hear the executioner step backward. The lever is about to move. Your pulse hammers in your ears. Then, the lever crashes down. The platform jerks. Wood slams. And suddenly, nothing happens. For half a second, the world freezes. The trapdoor beneath your feet does not open. The crowd gasps. You hear it clearly even through the hood. Thousands of voices inhaling at once. Confusion spreads instantly. The mechanism beneath the scaffold groans. The executioner curses behind you. You feel hands grabbing the rope, pulling it upward. Someone shouting. What happened? The trapdoor should have opened, but the wood beneath your feet remains solid. The executioner moves quickly now. You feel him pulling at the rope around your neck, trying to loosen it. The crowd noise explodes again. Not cheering, not yet. Just confusion. The sheriff shouts orders. Guards move closer, boots pounding against the wood of the platform. But beneath the scaffold, something else is happening. You hear the boards shift. Not the trapdoor, something beside it. A narrow section of wood suddenly drops downward beneath your left boot. Your foot slips. You stagger sideways. Before anyone above understands what is happening, a hand shoots upward through the opening. grabs your ankle, and pulls. The world lurches violently. Your body drops through darkness. The rope jerks against your neck, but loosens instantly as the angle changes. The hood tears away from your face. Cold air rushes over your skin. You fall hard, landing on rough earth beneath the scaffold. Hands grab you immediately. 2 men, maybe 3, pulling you deeper into the shadows. Above you, the crowd erupts, but not with cheers, with confusion, because from their angle, you are still standing on the platform. The trap door never opened, and the condemned man has vanished. One of the men beside you whispers urgently, "Don't speak." Another voice adds quietly, "We're not done yet." You look up. Through the cracks in the scaffold boards, you see boots moving above, guards running, the executioner shouting. But none of them are looking beneath the platform, because they believe one simple thing. The condemned man is still up there, standing on the gallows, waiting for the rope.
The men who buy the dead. Your lungs burn. The fall beneath the scaffold was not far, but the shock of it steals your breath for a moment. The ground here is not stone like the square above. It is packed earth, cold, damp, smelling strongly of soil and wood dust. Hands pull you farther into the darkness. "Quiet," one of the men whispers again. A lantern flickers briefly somewhere behind them, quickly covered with a coat. Only a thin blade of light remains, enough to show shapes but not faces. Above you, the platform shakes. Boots move. Voices shout. "Where is he?" "The rope!" "Check the trap!" The confusion spreads across the scaffold like fire through dry grass. You lie still. Your heart pounds so loudly you are certain the guards must hear it through the boards. One of the men beside you presses a hand against your shoulder, holding you down. "Stay low." His voice is calm, not hurried, not panicked. That calmness frightens you more than anything else, because men who do this calmly have done it before. You blink, trying to see their faces in the darkness. 3 of them, you realize, maybe 4. Their coats are dark, their boots muddy. One carries a short iron crowbar tucked beneath his arm. Another holds a narrow shovel. Tools, not weapons. Tools for digging. Your stomach tightens. "Who are you?" you whisper. The man nearest you smiles faintly. You cannot see the full expression, but you hear it in his voice. "Friends of the recently deceased." The words settle in your mind slowly. "Friends of the dead." Then he adds quietly, or rather, "they're buyers." Above you, the crowd roars again. Someone on the scaffold shouts that the mechanism failed. Another voice orders the rope removed. Guards argue. You imagine the scene above, the empty space where you stood, the rope swinging uselessly, the executioner staring in disbelief. But none of them are looking down here. Not yet. The man with the crowbar gestures toward a narrow wooden beam. "Give them time," he murmurs. They're busy trying to understand what just happened. You push yourself slightly upward, careful not to strike the boards above. "Why help me?" He shrugs. Help is a generous word. Another man answers instead. "We're businessmen." You hear the sound of wood shifting again above. Someone is opening the trap door. A guard curses loudly. "There's no body!" The words echo through the platform. For a moment, the entire square above seems to hold its breath again. Then the shouting begins. You look back at the men beside you. "Collectors," you say quietly. One of them nods. "Yes." There is no shame in the word.
only practicality. Victorian London had many professions that respectable society pretended not to see. Rat catchers, resurrection men, body carriers, men who worked where death lingered. You had heard rumors of them in prison, stories about grave robbers who stole fresh corpses from cemeteries and sold them to surgeons. Most prisoners spoke of them with disgust, but surgeons paid well, and medical schools demanded bodies, hundreds every year, more than executions could supply. The result was an entire underground trade. The man beside you taps the crowbar lightly against the dirt. "We were waiting for the drop," he explains. "That's the cleanest moment." You stare at him. "What do you mean?" Another man answers. "When the crowd cheers." He gestures upward. No one notices what happens beneath the scaffold. The explanation chills you. Your death would have been only the beginning. The moment the rope tightened, your body would belong to them. The law allowed surgeons to dissect executed criminals. It was considered a warning, a final punishment. But the surgeons rarely came themselves. They hired men like these, men who could work quickly, quietly, efficiently. "We take the body before it reaches the prison cart," the first man continues, "through the platform." He points upward toward the boards above you. "There's a narrow chute. Most people never notice." You picture it now, a hidden opening beneath the scaffold. The body drops. The crowd cheers, and while everyone is looking at the rope, the corpse disappears into darkness, delivered straight to the anatomy schools. Your skin crawls. "And today?" you ask quietly. The man with the shovel smiles again. "Today the mechanism didn't cooperate." Another voice from above interrupts the conversation. "They're searching the platform." Boots pound overhead. Someone drags something across the wood. The sheriff is shouting again. Orders. Accusations. Fear. Because if a condemned prisoner disappears, the entire system looks foolish. And public authority cannot afford to look foolish. The man beside you leans closer. "We have to move." You glance toward the narrow tunnel behind them. It slopes downward beneath the scaffold, disappearing into deeper darkness. "Where does that go?" The answer comes calmly. "To the wagons." Another pause. "And eventually, to the surgeons." Your stomach twists again. "But I'm not dead." The man with the crowbar chuckles quietly. "No," he agrees. "Not yet." Then he kneels closer to you. His voice lowers. "But if the guards find you, you will be." Above you, the shouting grows louder. Someone is climbing down from the scaffold. You hear boots hitting the ground near the platform supports. A guard's voice echoes through the beams. "Check underneath." The collectors look at one another. No panic, just decision. The lantern flickers once more as one of them uncovers it briefly. In that moment you finally see their faces clearly. Mud-streaked, tired, practical. Men who spent their lives near graves. The first man nods toward the tunnel. "Time to move." He extends a hand. "Come on." You hesitate only a second. Then you take it. Behind you, the guards' lanterns begin to shine beneath the scaffold. Light spreads slowly through the wooden beams, searching. And the men who buy the dead begin pulling you deeper into the darkness beneath London. The tunnels beneath London. The tunnel is lower than you expected. You must bend almost immediately as the collectors lead you away from the scaffold. The earth ceiling hangs close above your head, packed tight with old soil and fragments of brick. The lantern is uncovered only for a second, just enough to show the path, then hidden again beneath a coat. Above you, the world of the crowd still exists. Boots, voices, anger. But each step forward pulls those sounds farther away. The tunnel smells strongly of damp clay and rotting timber. Your hands brush against rough wooden supports placed along the walls at uneven intervals. Whoever dug this passage knew what they were doing. The beams are spaced carefully, holding back the weight of the city above. London rests on strange foundations, not only stone and brick, but tunnels, drains, cellars, forgotten passages. In some parts of the city, entire layers of older buildings lie buried beneath newer streets. Centuries of construction have left the ground honeycombed with spaces no one remembers clearly. And in those spaces, men like these work. The collector walking ahead of you lifts the lantern briefly again. A thin orange glow spills across the narrow passage. You see muddy footprints, wheel marks, and something else, scratches along the walls. You realize suddenly that these tunnels are used often, not just tonight. Your guide notices your attention. "Careful there," he says quietly. "The roof dips lower ahead." You duck. The air grows colder. Behind you, the shouting above the scaffold becomes faint, replaced by the dull rumble of the city itself. Carriages passing, distant bells, the muffled thud of thousands of footsteps. The man behind you speaks softly. They'll search the square first, then the prison, and eventually the streets. But they rarely search underground. You glance back. Why? The answer comes with a small shrug. Most people don't like going where the dead travel. The lantern light flickers again. For a moment, the tunnel widens into a small chamber. Wooden crates sit stacked against one wall. Two narrow handcarts lean nearby. The smell here is stronger. Earth and something else. Something faintly sweet. You recognize it slowly. Decay. Not fresh. Old. Your stomach tightens. The man with the shovel notices. "Storage," he says simply. "For nights when the surgeons want more than the graveyards can offer." He lifts the lantern higher. The chamber becomes clearer. You see the carts more clearly now. Each one has thick canvas stretched across its frame, and iron hooks attached to the sides. Your throat goes dry. You do not ask what those hooks are for, because you already know. In Victorian London, the demand for bodies had become enormous. Medical schools were expanding. Surgical training required real human anatomy. Students needed to practice. Surgeons needed to study. But the law allowed only executed criminals to be dissected, and executions did not provide enough bodies. So another market formed, one that operated mostly at night. Grave robbers dug up fresh corpses. Watchmen were bribed. Coffins were opened quietly and resealed. The dead traveled strange routes through London, from cemeteries to wagons to anatomy theaters. The collectors move quickly through the chamber. They do not linger. One of them lifts the canvas on a cart briefly, checking something beneath it. Then he nods and lowers it again. You do not want to see what lies under that cloth. The man beside you gestures deeper into the tunnel. "We're not stopping." Too close to the scaffold, you follow.
The passage narrows again. The lantern light shrinks to a thin circle around your feet. For several minutes, no one speaks. Only the quiet sound of boots against damp soil. Your breathing slowly steadies, but your mind refuses to calm. You were standing on a scaffold minutes ago. Now you are walking beneath London with men who steal the dead. You whisper finally, "Why did you help me?" The man ahead answers without turning. Timing. You wait. He continues. The drop failed. That made things messy. He glances back briefly. A body that falls clean is easy to take, but a living man causes trouble. Another collector chuckles softly behind you. And surgeons don't pay extra for breathing specimens. The dark humor of the sentence settles in your chest. For a moment, you imagine what would have happened if the trap door had opened properly. Your body would have dropped. Your neck would have broken. The crowd would have cheered. And while the authorities dealt with ceremony, these men would already be hauling your corpse into the tunnel. The thought sends a chill through your spine. The tunnel slopes slightly downward now. The air grows colder. Somewhere ahead, you hear something new. Water, dripping slowly. The lantern rises again. The passage opens into a larger corridor. Brick this time. Old brick. You recognize the shape immediately. A sewer conduit. One of the older drainage tunnels built beneath London long before the newer sewer systems were constructed. The collectors pause briefly, listening. No voices, no guards. Only the slow trickle of water along the channel beside the walkway. One of the men finally nods. We're clear. You stare down the dark corridor. How far do these tunnels go? The answer comes quietly. Far enough. Another collector adds, most of them lead somewhere useful. And tonight? He lifts the lantern slightly higher. They lead away from the gallows. You begin walking again. Behind you, the sounds of the execution square disappear completely. Ahead of you, the tunnel curves into deeper darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, another faint sound echoes through the brick corridor. Not water, not footsteps, something else. A dull knocking. Slow. 3 times. You freeze. The collectors stop too. One of them whispers, "That's not us." The knocking comes again, from deeper in the tunnel. 3 slow taps, exactly like the sound you heard beneath the scaffold. The second man who should be dead. The sound echoes through the tunnel again. 3 slow knocks, not loud, but unmistakable. The collectors freeze immediately. Lantern light drops lower, the man holding it instinctively shielding the flame with his hand, so the glow becomes a thin, trembling circle on the wet brick floor. No one speaks for several seconds. The water in the sewer channel continues dripping quietly beside the walkway. You hear your own breathing. Then one of the collectors whispers, "That's not one of ours." The man with the crowbar tilts his head slightly, listening. The tunnel ahead bends left into darkness. The knocks come from somewhere beyond that turn. 3 taps, then silence. You feel the same cold tightening in your chest that you felt earlier on the scaffold, because you have heard that pattern before, beneath the gallows. The collector beside you mutters under his breath, "Bloody hell." Another man whispers back, "You think it's quiet." They listen again. Nothing now. Only the slow drip of water
and the distant rumble of London moving somewhere above your head. The man with the lantern turns toward you. You said you heard knocking earlier. You nod slowly. Under the platform. His eyes narrow. How many? You answer immediately. 3. He exchanges a glance with the others. None of them look surprised, which makes your stomach tighten even more. What does that mean? You ask. The man with the shovel answers, It means we weren't the only ones working tonight. He gestures down the tunnel. Stay behind us. They move cautiously now. Lantern raised slightly higher. The tunnel curves left exactly where you expected it to. Beyond the bend, the brick passage widens into another chamber. Larger than the storage room earlier. Older, too. The bricks are darker here, stained by years of dampness and sewer runoff. Wooden crates sit stacked along one wall. Broken tools. Rusted hooks. A narrow wooden table stands near the center of the room. Something lies on it, covered with canvas. The collectors stop. The lantern light flickers across the chamber. No movement, but the knocking sound comes again. 3 taps, much closer now. You follow the direction of the sound instinctively, toward the table. The canvas shifts slightly. Your breath catches. One of the collectors steps forward slowly. He reaches out, pulls the cloth back, and you see the man beneath it. He is pale. His eyes are open, and the rope mark around his neck is still dark against his skin. Your mind struggles to understand what you are seeing. The man lying on the table looks almost exactly like you did 20 minutes ago. A condemned prisoner, recently hanged, or at least supposed to be. His chest rises suddenly. A sharp, desperate breath. The collectors swear softly. He's alive. The man's hands move weakly, bound, just as yours were. His eyes focus slowly on the lantern light, then on the faces around him, and finally, on you. For a moment he simply stares, trying to understand. Then his voice breaks through the cold air, barely a whisper. You too? The question lands heavily in the room. You step closer. How long have you been here? His lips tremble slightly. Not long. He swallows painfully. They thought I was dead. One of the collectors mutters, Jesus. The man on the table tries to sit up. He winces as the rope bruise tightens around his throat. Did the trap open? You shake your head. It failed. His eyes widen. Then he laughs weakly, a thin, exhausted sound. It failed for me too. The collectors exchange uneasy looks, because now the pattern becomes clear. 2 condemned men, 2 failed executions, 2 bodies meant for surgeons, both still breathing. One of the collectors rubs his jaw thoughtfully. This is bad.
Another answers, No.
He glances between you and the man on the table. This is worse. You look at him. Why? The man with the lantern answers quietly. Because if word spreads that 2 executions failed, the crowd will riot. He gestures upward, and the authorities will search every tunnel in London. The chamber falls silent again. The man on the table grips the edge weakly. What happens now? The collectors look at one another. Then one of them says something that makes your stomach drop. Well, if we can't sell 1 body tonight, he nods toward both of you, we might still sell 2. For a moment you think he is joking. Then you see his face in the lantern light and realize he isn't. The surgeons who pay for death. For a moment, no one moves. The lantern flame flickers softly, throwing thin shadows across the damp brick walls.
Water drips somewhere along the sewer channel, slow and steady, like a clock that no one can see. The collector who spoke last does not smile. That is what makes the moment so unsettling. He is not joking. The other men shift uneasily, but none of them immediately disagree. The man lying on the wooden table stares at them, breathing hard. "You can't mean that," he says hoarsely. The collector with the crowbar kneels beside him and studies his face carefully. "Relax," he murmurs. "We're businessmen, not murderers." The distinction feels thin in the cold air. You feel it too. Your eyes move slowly from one man to another. They are not cruel men, not in the way executioners are sometimes imagined. They look tired, practical. Men who work difficult jobs that respectable society pretends do not exist. But practical men can still make terrible decisions. The collector, standing nearest the tunnel entrance, speaks next. "We can't take them to the surgeons." He gestures toward both of you. They're breathing. Another man nods. "Exactly." The first collector sighs slowly. You know what happens if the guards find them. Everyone in the room understands that answer. If the authorities discover 2 condemned prisoners alive after failed executions, there will be panic. Questions. Investigations. Someone will need to take the blame. And the easiest explanation will be that the prisoners tried to escape. The punishment for that would be simple. The rope again. This time, carefully. You glance toward the man on the table. His hands are still bound. His breathing shallow. The bruise around his throat is darker now. "Cut him loose," you say quietly. One of the collectors hesitates. Then the man with the shovel reaches forward and slices the rope binding the prisoner's wrists with a small knife. The man gasps softly as the pressure disappears. He rubs his wrists slowly. "What's your name?" you ask. He swallows before answering. "Thomas." "Thomas what?" He shakes his head weakly. Does it matter? Perhaps it doesn't. The collectors begin whispering among themselves now. Quiet arguments. Numbers. Routes. Risks. You hear fragments of their conversation. Too dangerous. Guards will search. Surgeons are expecting the delivery. The man with the lantern finally raises his hand. "Enough!" The others fall silent. He looks directly at you and Thomas. "There are 3 choices tonight." You wait. First, he points toward the tunnel behind you. You run. Thomas laughs weakly. "That's not a choice." The collector nods. "No, it isn't. Guards will seal the streets within the hour." He raises another finger. "Second, we turn you in." Thomas stiffens. "Why would you do that?" The answer comes calmly. "Reward money." The room falls silent again. Then the collector raises a third finger. "Or we disappear." You stare at him. What does that mean? He gestures around the chamber. These tunnels reach half the city. Church basements, old cellars, warehouses along the river. You vanish. Thomas frowns. "And you help us. Why?" The collector shrugs. "Because if the surgeons discover we lost 2 bodies tonight, we lose our contract." He pauses. "And surgeons are not patient men." That statement sends another chill through your spine. Victorian surgeons held enormous power.
Medical schools depended on them. Hospitals answered to them. Students admired them. And their need for cadavers drove an entire underground trade. There were stories, whispered in taverns and prison yards. Stories about surgeons who paid extra for bodies that arrived very fresh.
Stories about men who disappeared in poor neighborhoods and were never seen again. Stories that polite society dismissed as rumors. But the collectors in this tunnel treat them as ordinary business. Thomas sits up slowly on the table. "Why didn't the surgeons just use graveyards?" he asks. One of the collectors snorts. "They do. Every night. But graves are guarded now. Families watch them. Watchmen patrol." He gestures toward the tunnel behind him. "Executions are easier." The truth settles heavily in the room, because the system works perfectly. The crowd watches the hanging. The authorities maintain order. And beneath the platform, the collectors take the body, delivered directly to surgeons before the corpse even cools. Efficient, silent, invisible. Thomas swings his legs slowly off the table. "They expected 2 bodies tonight?" he asks. The collector with the lantern nods. "Yes. One from the scaffold, and another from the prison yard." Thomas and you exchange a glance. "What happened to the other one?" you ask. The collector answers quietly. "We don't know." A long pause fills the chamber. Then Thomas says something that makes the lantern light seem colder. "I think we do." Everyone looks at him. He rubs his throat slowly. "When they brought me to the scaffold, there was another man already lying beneath it." Your stomach tightens. "Dead?" Thomas shakes his head. "No." Another pause. Then he whispers the words that change the room completely. "He was knocking." The collectors stare at him. 3 knocks. Your mind flashes back to the sound beneath your boots. The same rhythm, the same signal, which means one terrifying possibility. You are not the first. You may not even be the second. Somewhere in the tunnels beneath London, another man who was supposed to be dead is still alive. And someone is trying very hard to find him. The night London buried its secrets. The lantern trembles slightly in the collector's hand, not from fear, from thought. Because Thomas's words change something in the room. 3 knocks, the same signal. You heard it beneath the scaffold. He heard it before the rope touched his neck. And now the collectors are realizing something else entirely. They were expecting 2 bodies tonight, but neither of those bodies died. Which means somewhere in these tunnels, someone else was meant to collect them. The man with the crowbar speaks first. "Where exactly was he?" Thomas closes his eyes for a moment, trying to remember. "Under the scaffold, but farther back, in the shadows. I thought he was already dead." The collectors exchange looks. The man holding the lantern mutters something under his breath. "Bloody surgeons." You look at him. "What does that mean?" He hesitates, then sighs. "Sometimes the surgeons don't wait." The room grows quiet again, because everyone understands what he is implying. Victorian London was not simply a city of public punishments. It was also a city of experimentation. Medical science was advancing quickly. Hospitals were growing. Anatomy schools were expanding across the city. And surgeons needed something desperately. Bodies. Fresh ones. The collector kneels beside the wooden table. His lantern light flickers across the damp brick wall. "There was a case," he says slowly, "years ago. No one talks about it openly now. But the old collectors remember." Thomas leans forward slightly. "What case?" The collector looks at him. "Newgate." The name alone seems to darken the air. Newgate Prison had long been one of the most feared places in London. Executions were held outside its walls. Crowds gathered by the thousands. But what happened afterward was rarely discussed. The collector continues quietly. One winter morning, the execution went wrong. Your chest tightens. How? The rope broke. Thomas swallows.
And? The collector's voice drops even lower. The man fell. But he didn't die. You feel the same chill spreading through your spine again. What happened to him? The collector answers simply. The surgeons took him anyway. Silence spreads through the chamber. Even the water dripping through the sewer channel seems to pause. Thomas stares at him. You mean alive? The collector nods. They said the law allowed them the body. And technically, he was already executed. Your stomach twists. Victorian law was not always written for mercy. Sometimes it was written for order. If the rope broke, if the execution failed, if the body still breathed, the officials could simply declare the sentence complete and deliver the prisoner to the surgeons anyway. The collector leans back slowly. That story spread through the resurrection men. It scared some of them, made others richer. Thomas rubs his throat again. And tonight? The collector lifts the lantern. The light stretches deeper into the tunnel behind him. I think the surgeons expected that problem again. You glance toward the dark corridor. The third man. He nods. Yes.
A long silence follows. Then the man with the shovel speaks. Which means they might already be down here. The words hang in the cold air. Because if surgeons sent their own collectors into the tunnels tonight, this passage may no longer be safe. You hear something faint in the distance. Boots, echoing through brick. Slow, careful. Everyone in the room hears it. The collectors extinguish the lantern instantly. Darkness swallows the chamber. Thomas whispers, "That's them?" No one answers. The footsteps grow clearer. Somewhere down the corridor. Metal scraping against brick. Lantern glass clinking softly. More than one person. The collector beside you whispers, "Too late." Thomas grips the edge of the table. What do we do? The answer comes from the darkness. We run. But before anyone moves, the footsteps stop, and a voice echoes through the tunnel. Calm, educated, precise. Gentlemen. The sound travels easily through the brick corridor. We know you are there. A pause. Then the voice adds quietly, and the surgeons would very much like their bodies. The return to the scaffold. The voice echoes through the tunnel once more. Calm, controlled, educated. Gentlemen. The word rolls slowly through the brick corridor. We know you're there. No one moves. The darkness inside the chamber is almost complete now that the lantern has been extinguished. You can barely see the outline of Thomas beside you. The collectors are nothing more than shapes against the deeper shadow of the tunnel. But everyone is listening. Footsteps shift somewhere beyond the bend in the corridor. 2 men at least, maybe 3. Metal scrapes softly against brick. Perhaps a lantern being adjusted. Perhaps something else. The same voice speaks again. You have something that belongs to us. A long pause. Then the collector nearest you whispers under his breath. Surgeon. You glance toward him. How can you tell? He answers quietly. The voice. Victorian surgeons often spoke that way, measured, precise, confident that the world around them would eventually obey. The voice continues, "We are not unreasonable men. Return the bodies, and we will leave." Thomas stiffens beside you. You hear him swallow. Bodies, plural. The collectors exchange silent glances in the darkness. One of them leans close to your ear. "They think you're dead." The irony of that sentence almost makes you laugh. Above the tunnel, the city of London still believes the same thing. The crowd at the scaffold must still be searching for the missing prisoner. Guards running through the square. Officials shouting orders. But here in the tunnels beneath the city, a different kind of negotiation is beginning. The surgeon's voice grows slightly sharper. You know the arrangement. These bodies were promised. The collector with the crowbar finally answers, his voice low but steady. The arrangement was for corpses. You'll find none here tonight. A quiet chuckle echoes back through the corridor. That is unfortunate. The footsteps begin moving again, slowly, closer. Lantern light appears faintly around the curve of the tunnel, a thin orange glow creeping across the brick walls. The collector whispers urgently, "We move now." Thomas grabs your arm. "Where?" The collector points upward. For a moment you think he is joking, but then you see it. A narrow wooden ladder fixed against the brick wall of the chamber. Old, weathered, leading up to a small iron hatch in the ceiling. "Where does that go?" you whisper. The collector answers quickly. "Back to the scaffold." Your breath catches. Back to the gallows. Thomas stares at him. "That's madness." The collector shakes his head. "No." He nods toward the tunnel where the lantern light grows brighter. "This is." The footsteps of the surgeon's men echo closer now. Another voice joins the first, lower, impatient. "They're still here." Lantern light spills into the chamber. Not fully yet, but enough to illuminate the floor near the entrance. The collector pushes you toward the ladder. "Climb." You hesitate. "Back to the scaffold?" He nods. "The crowd is still there. That's your best chance." Thomas grabs the ladder first. His hands shake slightly as he climbs. The old wood creaks under his weight. You follow quickly behind him. Above you, the iron hatch scrapes open. Cold night air pours down into the tunnel. The noise of the city floods back instantly. Voices, shouting, boots running across wood. The scaffold. Thomas pulls himself through the opening. You climb after him. When your head rises above the platform, the scene above is chaos. Guards are searching the scaffold. The rope still hangs from the beam. The crowd presses forward in confusion, and the sheriff is shouting orders no one seems able to follow. For a moment, no one notices you emerging from the trap door. Then a woman in the crowd screams, "Look!" Hundreds of faces turn upward. You stand there, alive, on the same platform where you were supposed to die. The crowd falls silent again. Even the guards freeze. Because in that moment, the condemned man has returned to the gallows, the man who did not die. For a moment, no one in the square understands what they are seeing. You stand on the scaffold again, alive. The rope still swings slowly above your head. The trapdoor beneath your boots is closed. The hood lies on the wooden boards nearby, and thousands of people are staring at you as if they have just witnessed something impossible. The silence spreads through the crowd like frost.
Even the guards do not move. The sheriff lowers his hand slowly. His mouth opens, but no words come out, because the condemned man has returned, and the execution already happened, or at least it was supposed to. You hear someone whisper in the crowd, "He was dead." Another voice answers, "I saw it." A third voice shouts suddenly, "It's a trick!" The tension snaps instantly. The crowd surges forward. People climb onto carts again. Others shout for the guards. Some laugh nervously, but many simply stare, because the spectacle they came to see has changed. Now the story is stranger than death. The sheriff climbs the scaffold steps quickly. 2 guards follow him. Their boots strike the wood hard. They surround you before you can move. The sheriff studies your face carefully. "Explain." His voice is sharp now, controlled, but underneath it you hear something else. Fear. You glance briefly toward the open trap door behind you. No one else has emerged yet. The collectors are still below, perhaps watching, perhaps already gone. You speak carefully. The mechanism failed. That part, at least, is true. The sheriff turns toward the executioner. The man nods reluctantly. It jammed. The sheriff's eyes narrow. Then why are you not hanging from that rope? You do not answer immediately, because the truth would sound impossible. Men beneath the scaffold, collectors waiting in the tunnels, surgeons buying the dead. Instead, you say something else. The platform shifted. It is enough. The sheriff studies the trap door again. The iron hinges, the worn boards. For the first time, he notices the narrow seam along the left side, a seam that was not meant to be obvious, but which now looks different, altered. He kneels briefly, runs his hand across the wood. Then he stands again, his face pale, because he understands something that the crowd does not. The scaffold has been tampered with, and if the crowd learns that, the entire execution system will collapse into chaos. Victorian London relied heavily on spectacle. Public punishment worked because it appeared orderly. But if the mechanism failed, if the condemned man survived, if the gallows could not be trusted, then the crowd might stop fearing the law. The sheriff looks at the executioner again. "Remove the rope." The man obeys quickly. The noose is lifted from the beam. The sheriff turns to the guards. "This execution is postponed." The words ripple through the square like a stone thrown into water. Postponed. Not cancelled. Postponed. But the crowd hears only the first part. The condemned man lives. A roar erupts. Some people cheer. Others shout angrily. The spectacle they came for has vanished. But something better has appeared. A story. A strange story that London will talk about for weeks. The guards grab your arms. Not roughly, but firmly. The sheriff leans closer to you. His voice drops. "Say nothing." Then he nods toward the prison. "You go back inside." As the guards lead you toward the scaffold steps, you glance once more toward the trap door. For just a moment, you think you see movement in the darkness below. A hand. Or perhaps only shadow. The collectors are gone. The tunnels beneath London swallow their secrets easily. And somewhere beneath the city, the surgeons are probably still searching, because they were promised bodies tonight. And London has a way of delivering them, eventually. You were led down into the square. The crowd parts slowly as the guards move through. Faces stare. Whispers spread. "Did you see? He survived. The rope failed." Stories begin growing immediately. That is how cities work. Facts become rumors. Rumors become legends. By the time night falls, half of London will have heard about the man who stood on the gallows and did not die. But very few will hear the rest of the story. They will not hear about the tunnels beneath the scaffold. They will not hear about the collectors who waited in darkness. They will not hear about the surgeons who paid for the dead. Those parts remain buried, hidden in the same soil where London hides so many of its truths. You were pushed through the prison gates again. The heavy doors close behind you. For now, you are alive. But somewhere in the city above the tunnels, someone is still knocking. 3 slow taps, waiting for the next body.